Hello there, and welcome to Genuine Chats. It's Gina Gardner here, and I'm joined, as usual, by my good friend Rachel Davidson. Both of us are #1 international bestsellers. I have 2. Rachel is just about to publish #2, and hopefully that's going to become a bestseller. This week on the BBC, they've been talking a lot about being single, and we thought it would be a really interesting theme for a chat. And it's talking about celebrating being single on the BBC, and that sparked conversation between us about whether one should celebrate being single, and is it that people are making the best of being single, or actually that's something to aspire to?
Yeah, the BBC I think picked up on it because the Office of National Statistics, or the National Office of Statistics, I can never remember which way around it is, but the people that count have released figures that said 40% of the UK population is identifying as being single, which is a vast number of people.
It certainly
40%.
is. Is that 40% of the adult population?
Yeah, apparently that's across all age. Yes. Yeah, I mean, officially adults, and it's across all age ranges, so it's not a particular thing of say, let's say 20-somethings.
Yes.
Where you can expect an incidence of singledom.
In the same way that if you're talking about the most aged of the population, you'd expect there to be a higher percentage of single people.
Yes, but let's say that generally speaking, the demographics of between sort of mid-20s and your, when you start to reach the age where people start to die of natural causes, there is a higher incidence of singledom in that section of the population than there ever has been before, and this is quite a new dynamic. So it is quite interesting to explore the reasons why.
I think there's 2 very separate things to explore. One is the reason why are so many people single.
Yeah.
And the second is probably much more complex in that, are they single truly out of choice, that given everything else, they want to be single in the long term? Or is it a transitory position between relationships, or before they meet the right person? And when we're talking about celebrating it, is it about being happy to be in that place because you're living in the moment and making the best of it? Or is it truly what people want?
Well, that's what caught my attention, because they are really leading on the word, let's celebrate this being single. And it's not like I disagree with it, because I think the capability to be with one's own company and be happy with it, and not desperate for anybody, just a person to stand next to, no matter who, the quality of life. And I speak of this as somebody who was in an unhappy marriage for a long time. So I would not tick that box of singledom, but I was very alone and unseen, and So I find this let's celebrate being single quite intriguing, really, because I've never been a long-term single person. I mean, from the age of 23 onwards, I've always had a partner. And prior to that, I didn't have many relationships, and I didn't think of it as much an issue, but there was always a need in me, and this is where I get interested in the debate. There was always a need in me, always an expectation that I would find somebody that I could share my life with. And I think that's quite a deep requirement, but you've got a different perspective.
Well, I don't know that I have, actually. I think first and foremost that when we're children, we are, or certainly in the past, have been brought up to assume that you will find your life partner.
Cinderella.
And there are people who are thinking of suing Disney for raising unreasonable expectations. I think this is so multi-layered. I think that your point around our relationship with ourselves has to be a good one.
Yes.
If you're going to have loving, lasting, interdependent relationships with other people.
Yes.
And so in that sense, I think it's absolutely right to celebrate the relationship that you have with yourself.
Yes.
To learn to love and appreciate who you are, and to really validate that you are someone of value, and someone who is worth being with. Because maybe I meet people who are, a disproportionate of people who have issues around their relationships because of the work that I do. But the vast majority of people that I meet want to be in a loving relationship.
Yeah.
And I would say that so would I. And there have been, times when I have gone out searching and I've been burnt. And suppose a lot of why I'm not in a relationship is that I find my work incredibly satisfying, and time is an issue. And if I'm being really honest, that it's safer to stay in my known, the people that I have been had relationships with have very short-term ones been boring, and or not had the same core values. They've not been the right person for me. So rather than being in a loveless relationship that's not what I want, I would rather be single. But it's not that being single is for me the thing that would be my end goal.
Right. So that's the subtlety, because what you've described is worth celebrating. A positive choice not to settle for
second best.
Because
I meet so many people who are in a relationship that's not satisfying, that they're not necessarily ready to work on to make it satisfying, or their partner isn't, and you need two to tango. But the number of people who lurch from one disastrous situation straight into another without thinking about, I'm the common denominator here. What is it about the way I am or the way I behave that is leading to me having an unsatisfactory, unhappy relationship? And so I understand that being single is not a bad thing. And I don't want our viewers and listeners to think that I think that it is. It can be an incredibly satisfying place to be. But deep down, I suspect that the vast majority of people want to be loved by someone who really values them.
It's it's positively controversial because it's set in the context of, a celebration of being single. But my belief is very much that that human nature does drive us to have those deep relationships. Now, I'm not saying that the only state to be in is one where you have a deep and loving relationship all your life, because I know that there are people who achieve that for a very short period of time, and circumstances or whatever mean that they never then find it again. But my belief is that everybody has innate within their requirements that longing to share
and to be loved. Being loved, I think, is a really deep need for us.
I really do think
human beings. Interestingly, there's a lot of talk about marriages for life, and the divorce rate's never been higher. We now have large numbers of people who choose not to marry, but to be in a settled relationship, and they have everything but a piece of paper. And there's lots been talked about in the past or written about relationships, and they hold up the past as a great example. But I was reading something that was talking about the average life of a marriage in Victorian times. Now, because of women dying in childbirth, because of illness, because of industrial accident, the average marriage in Victorian times lasted 10 years. Okay? Now, there were exceptions to that.
Of course.
Women on their own were a challenge, in the sense that if they didn't have money behind them, they then became a call upon their relatives or upon society.
Society.
You haven't got to go back far in our lifetime when, for example, in India, certain sects carried out sutti, where if your husband died, you were thrown on the funeral pyre with him. Why? Because it was an economic thing. That if you didn't, that you would then become a charge to his family. Now, for a man, that was different. If your wife died, then you would immediately look for another wife to bring up your children and so on.
Yes.
So, there's lots of situations, if you go through history, which look at marriage being the ideal, even if within that relationship, your husband drunk your wages on a Friday night and beat you, the expectation is that you would stay in that marriage, because being single was, particularly for women now, was seen as a state that was undesirable.
The greatest threat to society.
And even the word spinster has quite a...
Well, it has a pejorative sense about it, doesn't it?
Being left on the shelf, being...
in the sense that bachelor does not.
No. You were rejected, you were left on the shelf. And I think it's a positive thing that now in the 21st century, that if you choose to be single, it is not seen as something that is negative.
So you would say that what the BBC's headline should probably be turned into is not celebrating being single, but celebrating having choices and not settling.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would agree with that is a much more, straight to the point kind of headline.
Celebrate being single if you are happy in that state.
Yes.
And you're not fooling yourself in terms of being happy in that state.
Yes.
You're not staying there because of fear of being hurt,
or
fear of getting out there. I think then you have to question why, what's going on there. But I think there are many people who go into a relationship, the relationship doesn't work. They actually then need that time to recover, to find themselves, and to celebrate being them. Now, if then you choose that you want to be single, because that's the state that you enjoy, that you are truly happy about that, yay, celebrate.
Absolutely, because let's face it, happiness comes in lots and lots of different ways.
Absolutely.
So it changes over time and life and so on. So celebrate being happy, if that's truly the case. It
would be great, I think, to celebrate whichever stage in your life, whichever relationship state you happen to be in, to celebrate being you.
Yes.
Now, I want to just go with lots of the women I meet that I work with. They have this view about a relationship, that I need a relationship and I need a man to look after me. I need a man to feel complete. Mm-hmm. It's true of men, but probably less so, certainly in my experience. And yet there are people that as soon as they become widowed, they launch into a relationship, because better to be in a relationship than to be on your own.
Well, I think there's a lot of that hang-up of the past that you were talking about earlier with regard to that, isn't there? That there's a lot of conditioning that basically says if you haven't got a partner, then you are missing something, and I think that does come a lot from our conditioning of the past and how our grandparents behaved and how, and so on and so forth.
But also there are social conventions. I mean, I've been single all my life. I haven't found my soulmate yet, but I'm open to it.
Excellent.
But you'll go to weddings or to events and you're on your own.
Yes.
And it is a challenge.
Yes.
Unless there are other people that you know, or that you're very extrovert and confident about speaking to people you don't know.
Yes.
Those situations can be difficult.
And that's why I think also the BBC are taking a view of celebrating being single, because there is that aspect to being single that society at large doesn't make it very easy for you, and you get questioned a lot. Some of the blogs and the
Yes.
content around the BBC programme is sort of saying about how the pressure, particularly from a female perspective, of, you know, long distant relatives basically saying to you, when are you going to get married, it's like the ultimate goal, and there's a lot of pressure going to restaurants to dine on your own, you know, all of these things. So I see, again, I understand why this word celebrate is used in that context, because, you know, people shouldn't be made to feel strange just because they're on their own sitting down for a meal.
No, and I'd like to think that is something that's improving, particularly with the number of people who are working away, for example, and go and eat in restaurants.
Yeah.
I think the celebrating who we are is, for me, very, very important. Because if you don't celebrate being you, then it's difficult to expect other people to celebrate you as you are.
Yes.
And, you know, recognizing that you aren't broken, that you are an amazing human being with many strengths and talents and so on, I think is, for me, an absolute must. And one of the big reasons for that is that every relationship we have with other people is a reflection of the relationship we have with us. So if you're prepared to settle for second best, that's probably because the relationship that you have with yourself is that you don't really value who you are.
Yeah.
Now, if your assumption is that being with somebody else means that you are complete, I've heard the phrase, I need a partner to complete me.
Yeah, or I've heard somebody once say, I need to belong to somebody.
I think there's some work to be done around, you know, recognising your worth as an individual. Now, then you can actually have a relationship with another individual who values themselves, and you can have a truly loving and interdependent relationship.
Yes.
But that dependency on, I need somebody to put my shelves up, to organise things, to sort me out, to support me, I think is a dangerous one, because it puts you into the place of being completely subservient and dependent upon that person to be wholly you, to be whole.
And of course, what you're describing is somebody who's in a state of fear and a mindset of lack.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they think about all the things they can't do because they're fearful or frightened or nervous about doing stuff. And then, so the obvious question is, so you want to get married just so that you have shelves put up occasionally? Well, I think you can pay people to come into your house and do that, don't you?
And I think that's an interesting one, because I think a lot of people, the being in a relationship is about financial security. I want someone to look after me. You know, running a household with one person is not a lot different in cost to running a household with two people. And I think there's a lot of throwback to the past where, you know, women, it's not that long ago that women couldn't own their own money. They were dependent upon.
Yeah, you weren't allowed a bank account.
No, I mean it's in relatively recent times that has changed.
Yeah.
If you wanted a mortgage or a loan, you had to get your husband to sign. In the early days of credit cards, women had to go and get their husband to sign to say that they would support the paying back credit card, because the assumption was that it was the man who was the major credit winner. Even in the in my time, that women were expected to be at home, look after the children.
Yes.
Prior to the First World War, as soon as you were married, if you were a teacher or a nurse, you had to give up.
You had to give up your job.
You were not allowed to work.
Yeah.
The assumption was you would go into the home. And part of that was to look after the family, but part of that was that you were taking away a job from a man who was a breadwinner for a family. Now that's changed, and many women, and you were in that situation, were the major breadwinner.
Yeah. So again, you know, celebrating the shift in attitudes towards independence and female emancipation in particular is definitely something. And I think that's probably what's underlying this demographic change, is that women are choosing not to enter that state as much as perhaps they did back when there was pressure. And the stats on divorce are still, I think, that most divorces are triggered by women.
Yes. What's interesting to me is you look at the number of people who choose not to marry, who are in very stable relationships, but they do not choose to marry. Now, I'd be interested to know the statistics of within those relationships, how often one of the partners would like to be married, but that's not what's on offer. You know, I was watching a program last night called Long Lost Family, and it's I think it's really heartwarming in the sense that researchers put people in touch with their birth parents. Now, there are many people in their 50s, 60s and 70s, perhaps a bit younger than that too, who were adopted because the stigma of having children outside marriage was so great that they were forced by their parents, by society, to have their children adopted. I'd like to think that that's not the case now, that children are adopted for a number of reasons, but they don't need to be adopted because there's any stigma about being born out of wedlock. And so many single women have children. Now, so long as those children are loved and nurtured and given every opportunity to develop into whole and vibrant and useful society, that's great. So there is lots to celebrate about the removal of fear and pressure around being single. But I think it would be disingenuous to not put the balance around. For a large number of single people, they would choose, given the opportunity, to be in a loving relationship.
I really, really do believe that, with possibly some exceptions, but I think the vast majority of people, if they could wave a magic wand and have their ideal partner, and guarantee, it's a silly word to use, but guarantee a life of being seen and heard and loved and nurtured, that I very much doubt that people would choose to stay single if that was the other option.
That was what was on offer.
I think a lot of people choose to stay single because they can't find that, or haven't found that, or they fear, for very valid reasons, they have fear around it. So I mean, I think the BBC has raised a very, very interesting point, and I hope that they will start to sort of uncover and peel the onion in this way, because I think there's a lot of subtlety and nuance within it. But I think if ultimately the BBC are saying, hey, let's celebrate the fact that nowadays we have choice, and people are not settling for a mediocre relationship when they can be, content to be on their own. I think that is definitely. I think happiness is worth.
It's really, and I believe happiness is a choice. It's something that we can achieve in, pretty well. It's our choice on a daily basis. Even when horrible things are happening, there are aspects of that day that one could be happy about. I think before we sort of close, I think one of the things that I'd just like to say to those who are listening, watching, that however you are, wherever you are in your relationship game, I think it makes sense to examine the relationship that you have with yourself. That if you, for example, are you happy to spend some time in your own company? Or do you dread the days that you're off because you're going to be on the road? And I've known many people who will do anything rather than be on their own. So are you content to be in your own company? Do you actually value all of your skills and attributes. And a very simple test is, if I asked you to write down a list of the things you don't like about yourself, and then I asked you to write a list of all the things you do like about yourself, which would you find easier?
Well, probably the former.
And my experience with working with people is that people can write reams about what they don't like and what they'd like to change, but they often struggle to find even 5 things that they really admire and like about themselves. And yet, if you ask them to talk about somebody else, they would be able to do that. And so, using the same criteria that you use for other people, use for yourself, no better, but no worse. That you're learning to, if what you want is a partner who's going to organise events, who's going to spoil you, who's going to do the heavy lifting, then you have to question, is that a good enough reason to settle for whoever you are with, or do you want something more? Because if you're settling for somebody who is just basically your concierge, then I think it's important that you question what you want out of a relationship.
And the quality of happiness that you're achieving.
Absolutely. And what you're giving up, because while you're in that relationship, you can't then be open to another. And one of the things that you might like to do is to write a list of all of the core values, the attributes of what you think are your ideal partner. And have that list open over a few days. And it should cover things like attitude to family, money, children, sex, everything. And then with a highlighter pen, go through the list and highlight what's negotiable. And what's not, because many relationships fall apart because the core values don't match.
You've got a great journal exercise of this. In
Absolutely.
Thriving,
if people are interested, or there's a whole program about having a better relationship with yourself called the Relationship Bridge. Now, then think about, what do you need to be the ideal partner for that person? Because often people will idealize the partner that they want, but then they're still not looking at who they are and how they are, and they're not a match for that great partner. So it has to be a two-way thing, interdependent, both people being prepared to be ready to work together.
That phrase, be the change that you want to see in the world, is very true, isn't it, in this case? If you behave in a particular way, you will attract that kind of behaviour towards you.
So, there's lots of help on the website, genuinely-you.com. The Relationship Bridge is all about relationships and how to work on yourself so you can be the best version of you. The Thrive Tribe is an ideal membership group where you can be supported if you are aspiring for something different in your life, or you want to work on yourself and your relationship, and you want support, help, validation. You'll find all of the details for that on the website. You'll also find both our books, The Point of Me, and my latest book, Thriving, Not Surviving, The 5 Secret Pathways to Happiness, Success and Fulfillment. And you can get those off the website. You can get a digital download for free of Thriving, Not Surviving, genuinely-you.com. So thanks for joining us. I'd love to know what you think. Go to the Genuinely You group, join it, and let us know what you think. That's on Facebook. And we look forward to seeing you next time. So genuinely-you.com. Thanks a lot, and see you next time. Bye-bye now.